This is the Existential Man Podcast, a podcast dedicated to helping men become the best versions of themselves by focusing on personal growth and other issues that men constantly deal with in today's society. So guys, stay tuned for another great episode of the Existential Man hosted by Matt Volkman. Hey guys, what's going on? This is Matt with the Existential Man Podcast. This episode 8, is actually a continuation of episode 7. This is part 2 of the conversation that I began with Jack Kammer, author and men's issues expert from episode 7. So if you guys did not catch the first half of the interview, definitely go back and check out episode 7 because this is the continuation of that interview, that conversation. And there's going to be things that you might miss in this particular episode if you have not listened to episode 7. So definitely go back and check out episode 7 if you haven't. If you have, go ahead and continue listening. We're going to have Jack take it right away and continue on right where we left off. So guys, thanks again for tuning in, and I'm going to turn it over to Jack right now. So Jack?
So I believe that the Q in LGBTQ needs to be looked at. The Q is thought to mean either questioning or queer. And queer is like the N word that some blacks have sort of taken back to own themselves. Mm-hmm. Some gay people have taken the word queer back. It was a word that was used against them. They've taken it back and it made it their own. But the other way in which the Q is sometimes discussed is that it means questioning. A young person especially who is involved in the LGBTQ community is questioning, am I maybe gay? And it's a pretty big and confusing question, especially these days. And I gotta believe that there are many young men, maybe 11 to, in their early 20s, who are thinking about who they're going to be as adult man. And they look around the culture and they see the expectations of adult straight men. And they see a lot of things that they don't like and don't want to be. I don't want to be like that. And so they think, well, if that's what a straight man is, I guess I must not be straight. And so I guess I need to question more closely whether or not I'm gay.
Yeah.
And I think that we could alleviate a lot of that difficulty if we could expand for boys the role of being a man the way we have expanded for girls the role of being a woman. Because a little girl who wants to grow up and be a mommy, that's cool. A little girl who wants to grow up and be a fighter pilot, that's cool too.
Yeah.
There's the ad campaign for Barbie, the doll.
Mm-hmm.
Barbie can be anything. The piece that I like to add is, and G.I. Joe is still a soldier.
Yeah.
So if we could open up for boys and men and young men, the male role, so that it included the multitudes, the myriad of opportunities for happiness and self-fulfillment that we have provided for women and girls, I think we'd all be a lot happier. We'd all be a lot happier.
That, or even just something simple like coming to the realization as a society that it is okay to pursue that which makes you happy rather than that which makes you the most money. And that is perfectly fine too.
Yes.
Yeah. Or at least finding a balance between quality of life and quality of income.
Yes.
Because I think I think with, and again, some of this is just the economy set up the way that it is. Capitalism, the hardest worker generally always wins. Generally, not always, because some people cheat the system, and some people there's nepotism and other factors that come into play. Let's be real, but
it's also true that a lot of men who win don't really win. I mean, right. They win one narrow piece of the game board.
Right.
But there's a lot of men who
die
are
with the most money in their bank account, but they've not got any life to show for it.
Well, their wife left them 18 years ago, and they haven't seen their kids in 14 years.
Yeah.
And the kids think he's a schmoo because the wife told them that he was. That's not a win, especially because a lot of his money is going to that ex-wife and those kids who do not care about him at all.
Right. And that may be why the guy works so much. As and we talked about, you and I talked about parental alienation syndrome on our kind of brief chat before when we scheduled this interview. And I am a, how do I say this? I'm a survivor of parental alienation syndrome. I don't have much of a relationship with my daughter because of what transpired between her mom and I, and the information that was. But that's neither here nor there. I think.
Well, it's actually sort of dead center, if you ask me. It's dead center because that mother should at least be investigated for child abuse.
I agree. I think
it is child abuse. It is a form of child abuse. She is not helping your daughter, right? It's your daughter?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. She is depriving your daughter of something at least as important as vitamin D, or you are an important nutrient in your daughter's life, and your wife, your ex, is not providing the minimum daily requirement. But there it is. She is the queen of a little domain, and ain't nobody, no judge, no prosecutor is going to go after her.
And that's pretty much the attitude she had, because
she knows.
There was already. We had orders in place. We had stuff signed by a judge, and it didn't matter. She did what she wanted when she, because the one clause that protected her from that, and this is the state of Alabama we're talking about, which is very, very still mother-centric when it comes to child custody, regardless of what they say they are. I did some research, and the majority of their cases, about 88.6% of child custody cases in Alabama are wind up with the mother being the primary care parent. And I've done, I've read some of the stuff on the father's rights movement, and some of the things some of the studies that prove that, or that at least demonstrate that fathers can be just as effective, if not more effective, in some parts of a child's life than the mother. And I don't think that that's far off base. My wife and I actually kind of got into an argument about it because we were out to dinner of all places, and I had this conversation. The waitress or the server came up, and somehow we got on that topic, and I was like, well, but if you look at some of the research, and she looks at me and she goes, you sound so misogynistic sometimes when you talk, because you don't think of how it comes out of your mouth. And I don't want to say that, yes, that's true.
So
go ahead.
So there is one of those tiny little things that works very effectively to shut us up. You're a misogynist. You're a misogynist because you dare to say that women ever do anything wrong, and that women aren't perfect, and that women sometimes are mean and cruel and selfish because they're human beings, not because they're women. But since you have the ability to sort of define the agenda, because you as women have you have a greater facility with words than men do over the years, over the eons, because you have talked to babies more, supposedly. That is the reason women are better with words than men are. So because you're better with words than men are, you get to decide that being a misogynistic is really bad, and being a misandrist is, well, who cares about that? Being a man hater, who cares about that?
Real quickly, because I don't know as we've ever covered that specific topic on this podcast yet, which is misandry. So do you want to go ahead and kind of define that, just so that our listeners understand?
It's the counterpart of misogyny. It's fear, hatred, or distrust of men. And I think, let me tell you a little story about that. Okay.
Yes, please do.
Okay, so I had a friend back, I don't know, in the 80s. He was a good feminist man. His wife treated him like dirt. Oh my God, she had him living out in the barn or something. And of course, he thought he deserved it, so he didn't object. He was a good feminist man. And I tried to make friends with him, and I was kind of friendly with him. And I said to him one day, no, did he say? Yeah, he said it to me. He said, did you ever notice that there is a word misogyny in our language, but nobody ever talks about misandry? That just goes to prove that hating men is just not allowed in our culture. And I said, yeah, I did notice that, but I came to the exact opposite conclusion. He said, well, how could you come to a different conclusion? I said, well, what do you call crossing the light if you're a pedestrian? What do you call crossing the light at an intersection when the sign says walk now? Well, there isn't any word for that. That's just called crossing the street. And I said, well, what do you call it when somebody walks across the street against the light or in the middle of the block, dodging traffic? Well, that's called jaywalking.
Jaywalking, yep.
That's called jaywalking. And I said, yeah, so maybe the reason we have a word for hatred of women that we all know and are afraid of, misogyny, and don't have a word for hatred of men is because, like jaywalking, we need a word to point out and punish what we don't want, whereas crossing the street at the intersection doesn't get a word, hating men, because there's no problem with that.
Yeah.
So how did he answer? He just insisted I must be wrong. His idea was the fact that nobody uses the word misandry proves that misandry doesn't exist. And I think it's exactly the opposite.
Oh, well, yeah. I think I do think it's kind of curious though that you won't find it really clearly. I mean, you'll find it clearly defined, but you're absolutely right. It's not used in an average, the average daily lexicon of most people out there. And right. That's part of the reason why I wanted you to define it, because you used it and I know it, I've heard it before. And I think more men than are maybe even they themselves are willing to admit are victims of that to some extent, on some level, at some point, on a regular basis.
Yes. No doubt.
Well, yeah. I mean, with all the stuff that we've pointed out, but ultimately, one of the things that you and I talked about too was I've got a 5-year-old boy, and you and I talked about the book, The War on Boys by Christina Hoff Sommers.
Yep.
And some of the stuff that she points out that we talked about with, at least with regards to the education system and the general societal viewpoints on men, and what is considered masculinity, and pretty much anything that is traditional masculinity is considered toxic. I'm afraid for my 5-year-old boy that as he continues to grow up to be a man, and he's trying to figure out, just like you and I were talking about, what it takes to be, what an adult straight male goes through. It's not that I'm concerned whether he'll be gay or not. Oh gosh, pardon the dogs. Hold on. It's not that I'm concerned that he's going to be gay. I'm going to love him one way or the other, and whatever he chooses or feels that he is in his own heart and his own mind, that's on him. Like I'm not him. I can't decide for him what he should or should not do, or who he should or should not be. The only thing I want him to be is happy and healthy. And if I've done that and he turns out to be happy and healthy with and confident in who he is, I feel like I've done a good job as a dad. But I fear that the influences of the outside world are going to be greater than that which I can provide for him as a good male role model in his life.
And so that's that. And so what might happen and what would be good for you to try to keep from happening is, as you see your boy growing up and you start seeing the possibility that the way he wants to grow up is not a way that is going to provide him the easiest path in life, you might, as a loving father, knowing how being a boy was for you and growing to manhood was for you and for your father and for your grandfather, you might, out of a sense of love, try to keep your boy from being who he really is, because you're afraid that the world just won't accept him as he really is. That if he wants to be a poet, for instance, he ain't going to make a lot of money. Might fill his heart, might make him very happy, might fulfill him, might keep him out of trouble, might keep him from getting depressed, might be really beautiful. But you might think, oh my God, he's going to be so lonely as an adult. Hey, Johnny, why don't you do, I don't know, X, Y, Z. Do this thing so you can make some money and then you can have a family. You know, it would be great if by the time your little boy grows up, he's got a perfectly excellent chance of finding a woman whose path to happiness was to make a lot of money in some career that she's really good at, that she really loves. And she wants to have kids. And she wants to find a man like your boy.
Who will stay home. Yeah, who will stay home, indulge in his poetry and his writing, and do the thing that he loves to make him happy while taking care of the kids so she can go do what makes her happy. Yeah, and
then everybody's happy.
If that happens, I'm perfectly fine with that. I mean, because ultimately, look, if it leads to his happiness and his health and he's well off, or I mean, he's doing well for himself in terms of his own personal well-being. Like that's all I think a father could ask for.
Well, okay. And that's good. And
that's the expectation is different. I think the societal expectation is different. And that's what my concern is.
Well, the societal expectations are, of course, different because Barbie can be anything, and G.I. Joe is still a soldier. So, look, as noble as what you're saying is, the pressure you might feel is going to be pretty strong. And
I know
the science shows, the research shows that fathers are a lot tougher on their boys in this regard than mothers are. Okay, so let's just start thinking about the generations coming up.
And I had this conversation.
You know about the suicide statistics, right?
Oh yes, yeah.
Okay.
Well,
so we can't just pretend this isn't a problem.
It is a problem, and that's one of the that's what and that's why I have to consciously make an effort and remember whatever it is that makes him happy and whoever it is he wants to be. I have to support that and love that regardless of what. And I do, like I'm on a very, very deep level in my heart, ignoring all the crap that goes on in my brain. Like, that's not okay. He should be doing this. Why doesn't he into sports, but he's into Matchbox cars and YouTube and all the crap that he's into now that I don't agree with. Or don't understand completely. I was into Matchbox cars, but the YouTube stuff, in terms
your
of
father couldn't understand that, Matt.
Yeah, well, he did. But I mean, like, he's got his interests are so broad and varied. Like, it's not like it's not like he's, there's a lot of kids sometimes a lot of kids, you'll find them kind of narrow down on one large interest. Like my nephew plays baseball. He's big into baseball, and his other thing is Hot Wheels cars. Beyond that, he doesn't really have much that he's into. My son is like, oh, I want some Matchbox cars this week. Oh, I want some Legos. Oh, I want some airplanes. Oh, let's get the sprinkler out and go play in the yard and get dressed up and play dress up in superhero costumes. And granted, he's 5. Like,
yeah,
he hasn't figured out that focal point yet. But ultimately, I know that it's going to be a struggle for me because, as you know just as well as I do, we live what we learn, and we learned from our fathers that this is the way that men act. This is the way that men provide. This is what men do. And part of that onus is on me as a father of a young boy to change that dynamic for my future generations going forward. So I have to be cognizant of that as a dad, to provide the open space for him to grow into what it is that makes him happy and allow his personality and who he really is to shine through. And I think a lot of dads probably struggle with that to some extent. Yes. And I know that I do, and I probably will. I do know that in the grand scheme of things, I am harder on my kids in general than my wife is. There are a lot more things that she's willing to accept in terms of behavior from them, actions, words, etc., than I will.
Yes.
I don't know if that's a good thing, but
I think it is a good thing, and it's a very functional thing. I once had dinner with a psychiatrist friend of mine and said to him over dinner, in your experience as a psychiatrist, do you see any fundamental differences between men and women as your clients? And immediately, without hesitation, he said, oh, yeah. I said, well, what is that difference? He said, women focus on what people need. Men focus on what people deserve. And at first I said, well, isn't that the same thing? He said, no, it's not the same thing. Think about it. And of course, he's right. So let's think about it. If a mother of a newborn focused only on what that baby deserved, it would be dead in 8 hours.
Yeah.
Okay.
It hasn't done anything to deserve anything. What are you talking about other than lay there and be cute?
But if the mother focuses only on what that baby needs for its first 18 years, it's always going to be a baby.
Yeah.
And so the father, from the very get-go, is right there looking for opportunities to help that child deserve what it gets, so that child can grow up as an adult who is in a position to provide for the next generation of babies who haven't earned anything yet.
Yeah.
And so
it's a balance too.
It's a partnership between you and your wife. Now, there are some women who focus, oh no, I'm all about what the kid deserves. And there are some men who are all about unconditional love, and I'll give that baby whatever it needs. But too much of a good thing is a bad thing, and a combination of two good things has a much better chance of being a healthy mix. So,
and this is where that 50-50, it's like, like we were talking about earlier in the child custody stuff before. It's like, you got two parents who claim to be able to provide better for the children, but really both of them are kind of full of shit, because one might be able to provide better emotionally and the other might be able to provide better financially, but together, even if they're not husband, wife, co-parenting together is going to provide the best possible results for fulfilling the needs of that child 100%.
Yes. And there's another possibility besides the one parent taking care of the kid emotionally and the other providing financially. There's also very distinct possibility that there will be some emotional situations that the mother can do a better job helping the kid with, and there will be some emotional situations that the father can do a better job helping the kid with, whether the kid's a boy or a girl.
Right. Well, and
So,
I know what you're saying. I was trying to do, I'm
okay,
not discounting a mother's ability to provide financially or a father's ability to provide emotionally, because I know, men are not naturally as good, I think, at the nurturing aspect in general, but it's something that comes with necessity and time.
It depends on how you define nurturing.
Well,
and
true.
the way we define nurturing is the way women define nurturing, because nurturing is women's domain. Women are the experts. They are the recognized experts on raising children. So if a woman says this is nurturing, then that's nurturing. Just like 50 years ago, when there was an executive who said, this is how you manage a business. This is business management. And it was the man's way. And women had a different way. And they're both good. Yeah. So it's the idea of the rebuttable presumption for joint custody that I don't see feminism really getting much behind. And of course, I don't see men getting much behind either, but that's a whole different story that we've talked about. We're afraid and we don't really believe in ourselves. But a rebuttable presumption for joint custody would say, look, unless you can prove that one of the parents is a schmo and no good, they both get to continue being parents. Just like, unless you can prove that somebody is a criminal, you don't get to put them in jail. Yeah. You've got work to do. If you want to take this child away from one of its parents, you got some work to do.
Yeah.
He or she doesn't have to prove that they're good. You got to prove that they did something wrong. And that's not the way it is in many states.
No.
And it's got to change.
It isn't. It isn't. And it does have to change. And, I've read a bunch of articles about, how the court system changes. And, man, I got to tell you, by the way, while we're on the subject, I read something about a month ago. It made me absolutely livid. There was a mother in, I want to say it was Arkansas, and she had gone to the news outlets talking about how her rights as a mother are being infringed upon because she is losing time with her child that the father shouldn't have access to. And she said, well, it provides me great emotional distress when my child has to leave for the father's visitation time, because my child and I've raised that child since he was, or I might have been a girl, I don't know, but I've raised this child since he or she was, a baby, and I birthed it, and there's this unspeakable bond between me and this child. And every time this child is taken from me or forced to go visit her dad, it puts a damper on that bond, and we feel like we have to rebuild it. And I'm missing out on all this time and all these things. And I'm thinking to myself, well, shit, now you're seeing kind of what most men go through when it comes to child custody cases. But the fact that she thinks that even as the primary parent, she has any right to complain about the limited time that her ex-husband or the child's father gets to spend with the child, and has a right to feel bothered or upset about that. Sorry, that's not flying with me. And so it really kind of pissed me off. Like, it made me livid. I was like, who does this bitch think she is? Like,
well, it's interesting how she is thinking about herself and the time that she doesn't get to have with her child. It's all about herself. It's not about what does the kid need. And what the kid needs is some time with the father.
I agree.
It in some ways, it understandably makes you livid, but at least she hasn't gone the route yet of accusing him of abusing the child. That's, maybe True. In the offing, but, a lot of women will do that. Oh, he's abusive. Yeah. We're afraid of him. He sexually abused the child. what judge is going to risk
that's an emergency custody. That is an emergency custody situation right there. They will revisit any custody order that is in place once a claim like that is made.
Yep.
Guaranteed.
It's the atomic bomb. It's the atomic bomb of divorce. And, another thing that would be really great, I think, would be if one of the great things about male culture is a sense of honor. When we try to do the right thing, at least it's written in our, code of ethics. We don't always follow our code of ethics, but at least it's in our code of ethics. We have a sense of honor. And if a man does something wrong, it's not automatically going to be the case where all of his buddies get around him and say, "We love you, man. It's okay. Don't let anybody say you did anything wrong." No, you did something wrong, man, and you better own up to it. That's a matter of honor. You don't expect to see that as often or as strongly in female culture.
No.
It's much more likely to be, "Oh, you poor baby. We understand why you did that." And that's got to stop, because who's going to stop these false allegations and these parental alienation situations and these situations where mothers deprive their children of their father? It's not going to be men who are going to do this. It's going to be changing what is acceptable among women, a sense of female honor and ethics. And
until they start
got a long way to go in that
accountable. Oh yeah. Until they start holding each other accountable. It's kind of like, yes. and I know that I've talked to many people, and I think even my wife may have said this at one point in time, or a bunch of us guys when we're all together as couples, and be like, "Why do y'all even get so dressed up to go out anyways? You're all married. It's not like you're going out to impress anybody." And, inevitably one of them's like, "Yeah, we don't get dressed up for other guys. We get dressed up for other girls because we know what kind of shit we're going to get or looks we're going to get if we go looking like a half-eaten bag of ass or something like that." It's like, okay, I get it. So until you guys start holding each other accountable for the negative behaviors in terms of that, I mean, they're all about what the reputation they have with other women. It's not so much other men that they're concerned about. They don't want to be.
Sisterhood is powerful.
Right. And so until, when it comes to like negatively affecting your child by taking time away from the dad, until other women are like, "No, look, it takes both to raise a child properly." And until you figure that out, and until other women and start pushing that and being vocal about it, it's not going to change. Because of course, if it's just men that are saying, it's like, "Oh, well, they're just disgruntled men." Most of them have probably had their child taken away. So they've got something to say about it. No, it's got to be from the inside out.
And so it's really going to take special women, really honorable, courageous, ethical women, to call other women on this behavior, because the woman who is thinking, "Maybe I'll speak up to put an end to this bad behavior from other women," might be thinking, "Maybe I kind of like having all of this support, because I might want to take my kid away from my ex-husband if I ever want to divorce him.
Right.
I might want to do the same thing, and I might want support for it." That's not honorable. That's not honorable.
No. And I gotta say, I mean, like I'm, my wife was married before me, and she has 2 older kids from her previous marriage. And I gotta say, I am very impressed with the way that her and her ex-husband handled the whole situation. They were both absolutely adults about it, at least from my observation. My wife never once intentionally or knowingly spoke bad about the ex-husband in front of their kids. She never once made him out to be a villain of any kind in any way, shape, or form. Never once tried to take away anything that was rightfully his. And even after her and I got married, her and I both had a conversation, and me having kind of essentially been replaced as dad by my daughter's mother, or at least intently replaced as dad. I flat out told her, and she flat out agreed that, hey, look, the kids already have a dad. I will be there to love and support and care for them as another positive male figure in their life, but I am not dad, and I'm not going to take the place of dad. And so decisions that have to be come to about the two kids, when they are not in our household, will be dealt with between the two of you, not between, her and I. And then obviously if they were in our house, we would make a decision as far as what happened and how to handle the situation. But when it came to the big stuff like medical and whatnot, they handled it, and I tried to stay out of it. If she asked my input, I'd give it, but she was very, very, equal opportunity about that, I guess, for lack of a better term. And I'm super proud of her for that, because it's not easy, especially I think most men are so used to it that they kind of expect it. So it's just like, well, whatever happens, I guess, I got fucked again this time, or just another one bites the dust. But for a woman to take the initiative on that and really try and do better, she really made me proud with it. So
yes, good for her, and good for you. And let me ask you a question. Did you observe this really honorable behavior on your girlfriend's part before you married her in this regard? Did you see, wow, she's really being fair to that man, even though she's divorcing him or they're getting divorced? She's being really fair to him, and I really admire that. Was that part of what attracted you to her?
No, to be honest with you, I mean, like, I'll be honest with you. Like, I noticed it, and I think initially, because it was such a shock to me in comparison to how I had been treated, it almost kind of made me resentful, on some levels, not towards her necessarily, but just at the situation and the system that I found myself in, because it kind of made me, it's like, well, why couldn't I have been dealt this hand as opposed to the one that I was given? And I think it took some time for me to get used to the consistent regular communication. And because, again, it's not something that I experienced, even though I had a child of my own with somebody else. Trying to get communication between me and the mother was damn near impossible, because she didn't get what she wanted from me, and therefore I'm not going to get what I wanted from her. And that's kind of the way that it came across, whether that was true or not. That's the way it came across. And my wife was like, look,
for you for handling it the way you did. Did you feel maybe a little bit jealous of your wife's ex?
Yes. I'm man enough to say it. Yes, I did, because, I mean, again, it's, that constant communication. I realized it was about the kids, but it was, it was like that. Hey, let's try and do joint birthdays, joint holidays, so that the kids don't have to feel like they got to pick and choose between which family to be with. Let's just make sure that everybody that loves them can be around them as much as they possibly can. And looking back on it, after the first couple years of dealing with that and kind of getting used to it, and kind of feeling the flow and learning where I fit in and all of it, like it became fine. And it was actually something that I praise her for. But, I think I'm man enough to say and honest enough to say that, yeah, I was jealous, and I had an issue with it to begin with, because it was not something like that. That's just not the way that I saw those types of situations going. It was an anomaly to me. And so, being that it was so different from what I had experienced, and many men that I'd talked to had experienced in the similar situation, it was just like, this is really foreign, and I don't quite understand it.
Yeah. Well, good for you, and good for your wife.
Yeah.
And good for your wife's ex. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Come to find out, a long time after the fact, he was not so honorable in his behavior, believe it or not. But that's beside the point, or not beside the point, but that's not anything that was in our control. And so, again, let go of that which you can't control and focus on what you can. So, we did what we could with what we had to do. And that was really the point. And again, she handled it very, very well, probably better than most, in a similar situation. So,
Yeah.
well, look, hey, we've had a great conversation, and I don't want to cut it short because I know we could probably talk for a whole lot longer, but I don't want to keep you on your vacation, and I got kids and dogs in the background that got to get some stuff done. So, but I do want to ask you. So, I guess if you could give me 3 solid action steps that most men could take, whether it's having a conversation with somebody about or just being committed to being more open and having conversations and saying, look, this is what's going on in my head. This is where I'm at. How can we make this better? So give me 3 solid action steps that you think we should, all of us men that are listening, if we could at least take one, what would you do?
I can think of 2 right away. One is when you're out with your friends, maybe 2 couples, 3 couples, and you're out having dinner and drinks. It will often happen that somebody will make some kind of remark about men and or women. At least it seems like it happens a lot in my circle of friends. And, something disparaging about women. Something disparaging about men will be said, or something glowingly praising, overly exaggerating praising women will be said. Like believe the woman or whatever. Sexual politics are all around. A concrete action step would be to say, look, I don't want to ruin the party here. I don't want to be a wet blanket on us having fun here, but I just need to say, as a man of honor and integrity, that I really, really don't appreciate when you make comments that put men down like that. And that's all I'm going to say. And if you'd like to talk about it later, just between you and me, I'll be happy to meet you for coffee. End of story. That'll put a damper on things for 30 seconds, but somebody will pick up and tell the joke, and then things will get back to normal. But look, if she wants to fight you right there, if she wants to make a scene out of it right there, you won't win, but you've already won.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
She'll tear you up, and the other women will probably be like, "Oh, Matt, why did you have to make a big deal out of that?"
Yep.
Well, I didn't really make a big deal. I just sort of said something that I felt like was right, and I wanted to say it, and I said it respectfully. And I'm not surprised that it's not received well, but I'm glad I said it.
Yeah.
Happy to talk with you over coffee if you'd like. The other thing is in relationships with women. Do you know the idea of the I feel statement?
Yes.
Okay. I feel statements are really, really, really effective. Do you want to explain them? Do you want me to explain them for those of your audience who haven't heard of them?
Go ahead. No.
All right. So an I feel statement is a way of saying what's true for you. It doesn't attack. It doesn't accuse. It doesn't put the other person on defensive, at least not intentionally. She might go on the defensive and start attacking you, but it's not the intention. I often find when I have to have a conversation with my wife that's going to be somewhat difficult, I find it very helpful to say, okay, come and sit with me and we're going to hold hands while I talk with you. I need to talk with you. And holding hands is sort of like a lightning rod. It discharges negative energy.
Yeah.
It discharges tension. And so an I feel statement would be, it always starts with I feel.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next thing you have to say is a feeling. So for instance, you may not say, it's not an I feel statement to say to your wife, I feel you are an idiot. Well, I was just going to say so. No, that's because you are an idiot is not a feeling, right?
I feel you are an asshole.
That's not a feeling. So you have to say something like, and you have to really sometimes, especially as men, because we are raised to think that the only emotion we should express, the only unhappy emotion we should express, is anger.
Right.
And as soon as we express anger, we lose, because an angry man is a dangerous man, and everybody is perfectly justified in running away and not listening to him. But if you can dig deeper, anger is often a secondary emotion. And we turn to anger because we have learned over the years that nobody really cares about what we really feel. And so we just jump right to anger. But anger is often a secondary emotion to emotions like sadness, fear, and hurt. So you might say to your wife, I feel hurt. And then you follow up with when. I feel hurt when something happens. And what I would like to have between us the next time is whatever. It's nice. I feel it's nice. And women, one of the best things about women is that they do, one of the highest values of womanhood is trying to help other people, caring about other people, empathy.
Yes.
So when you say, if you were to say to your wife, I am so pissed off, well, that doesn't really bring her closer. But if you say,
no,
but if you say, baby, I feel hurt. She's like, oh, what? Whoa, what? Now, not every woman's going to be like, oh, tell me more.
Yeah.
But a lot of women will, and a lot of women will say, well, you feel hurt. Well, what about me? That's going to happen too. And you can say, okay, I'll talk to you later. I'm going for a walk now. But if you can master and have your woman, your wife trust you to really try to talk about your feelings. And I know feelings aren't manly, but they are. They're human.
I don't buy that for a minute. I know that that's the stereotype, but look, I've never felt more masculine when I figured out how to, I guess, tap into and understand the actual emotions that I was feeling. I don't have to express them. And this is something that me and one of my first guests, Charles Matthews, he and I discussed the same thing. It's like being an emotionless man is basically being a shell of a man. Like, you have emotions, acknowledge and understand them, or learn to acknowledge and understand them first, and then know how they make you react and then fix those reactions. But it's not about not having the emotion. It's knowing when and where it's safe to express those emotions.
And it's also important to believe that your feelings are important, because as a kid, you began learning that your feelings weren't important because, oh, shut up, I'll give you something to cry about, that kind of thing. Or what are you, a wussy? You're a
stop
sissy.
being a sissy.
Yeah, all that stuff. So those are two things. And then a third concrete thing would be to talk about the counter narrative and say, I call myself the counter-feminist social worker. And it's pretty easy to be a counter-feminist because you don't have to be an anti-feminist to be a counter-feminist. So you can say, sort of like the first thing I mentioned at the table with your friends, being a counter-feminist doesn't mean you say that all of feminism is wrong. It just means you think all of feminism is incomplete. And so as a counter-feminist, when you are in a meeting at your company, for instance, well, this might be very risky depending on where you work, and they're doing some kind of...
You're bringing work into this, that might be a problem.
That might be a problem. We probably should leave it alone. That wouldn't work. People would...
No, go ahead. I want to hear.
All right, well, suppose, you're hearing some sexual harassment training. Mm-hmm. It would be pretty gutsy in this situation. But this is an example of counter-feminism. To say, I hear what you're saying, and I'm not going to say that it's entirely wrong, but I'm also going to say it's not entirely right. And I would love to have an opportunity to meet with you after this meeting, after this session, to talk with you about how this session made me feel as a man. Well, that's asking a lot, I guess. That's not a small thing that we can expect men to do. But the idea of being a counter-feminist generally is to say, yes, and yes, there are problems that women face, and there are problems that men face.
Right.
And so it doesn't mean you have to completely deny everything women say. What you have to do is assert that everything women say is not everything that there is to say.
Right.
So
I like that.
Okay.
I really like what you just said. Everything that women say does not mean that that is everything, or that women say everything there is to say.
Yeah. Yes. Feminism is 50% right.
Yeah.
And let's be very clear. That, we're 100% wrong.
Right. And let's be very clear for those of you that are listening that might be of a feminine persuasion. It's not that we're saying that, feminism doesn't have valid arguments and valid concerns for why it got started. This isn't what this is intended to be at all. This is simply addressing the other side of the coin, which nobody seems to be talking about.
Yeah. It's a request to have a negotiation. The negotiation we should have had 60 years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
And there are two sides to every coin.
Yeah. And what's really interesting is that many of the people who we have problems with talk about diversity and why we need to have diversity in, every business. And it's important to have, women are underrepresented. But women's perspectives need to be heard in business. Well, that's great. Why aren't you so concerned about having diversity in the viewpoints that help to shape gender relations and sexual politics? Why, in this era of looking for the win-win and collaboration and valuing your stakeholders and really listening, not just listening, but really hearing.
Yeah.
In that era, this era that we're in, it's really amazing. It's quite astounding how thoroughly the male point of view has been ignored and even demonized.
Yep.
In our effort to try to make things better between men and women.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that because and you know what they say,
and it's true. We see the truth of it. If you're not at the table, if you're not at the table for the negotiation, if you're not at the table for the meeting or the negotiation, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu.
Right.
And we've been on the menu, and we have been carved up and sliced up, and they're eating their lunch, and dinner doesn't look like it's going to be too good.
No, it does not. All right. Well, shoot, Jack, it has been an absolute pleasure. Do you have any parting thoughts?
Well, can I put in a little plug?
Absolutely. Please do.
Okay. So along with being a podcast guest, which I really enjoy, I am also a podcast host of 2 podcasts that will be launching on July 7th, 2021. It's just a few days from the day we're recording this.
Yes.
The two podcasts are Men Are Talking. This is an example of Men Are Talking. I mean, this is your show, but it would be Men Are Talking is me talking with men. Mm-hmm. The other of the 2 podcasts that I run is called Goodwill Toward Men, which is the same title as that book that got sandbagged. And by the way, it wasn't just that one reporter from the Sun who sandbagged it. There were a whole bunch of other sandbagging.
I started reading further down, and then I ran out of time because I was
no problem. No problem. It's a sad story. So Goodwill Toward Men is a book, is a podcast in which I interview women who are women of goodwill and honor and caring and respect and balance and fairness for men.
Very cool.
And they will talk about women's advantages, not just their disadvantages. They will talk about men's disadvantages, not just their advantages. it's, it's a balanced, healthy approach, I think.
All right.
At least I want it to be.
Yeah. And they can find these at I assume they're going to be on all the major podcast platforms, iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, probably Stitcher Radio and Spotify and everywhere else. But also I wanted to tell people they can come find you at www.malefriendlymedia.com. All right. And do you want to plug for your personal site too?
No, that's good. Friendlymedia.com is where the podcast will be sort of hubbed. Okay. And you can reach any and all of them from there. Okay.
And then the other thing too is, are you going to have links to your articles and some of the stuff that you've done there as well?
So I will mention the personal website, jackkammer.com.
Yes.
And jackkammer.com has pretty much all of my articles in PDF form linked in chronological order.
Yeah.
And my books are up there too. So jackkammer.com if you want to see more.
And guys, if you want the hard copies of this or you want the links to this, all of this will be in the show notes. So please check below in the show notes. You can also check out existentialman.com/episode 7. And it will also be there. So guys, again, I want to thank Jack for coming on. Jack, I really appreciate the conversation. It has been an absolute pleasure. And I really, really look forward to maybe talking again after a few months or a year or so and see what kind of progress each of us has made.
Oh, yeah, I think probably even in a year, probably there will still be a need to talk about these things.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure there will be.
For the next 50 years, there'll be a need to talk about these things. I would love to, Jeff. It's been a real pleasure talking with you. And thank you for the conversation.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Again, thank you guys for tuning into The Existential Man. Thank you for Jack for joining us on the show. And guys, take care. We will catch you on the next one.